Greed, for lack of a better word, is good. Greed is right.
Generally speaking, greed is bad for cinema. Like when a studio splits two movies into three to make more money, or imposes an arbitrary 2-hour runtime to make more money. But sometimes Gordon Gekko is right. Back in 1984, Hasbro bought the rights to a series of toys which featured parts that shifted to turn them into vehicles. They rebranded these as Transformers. The toys were a phenomenal success, and Hasbro decided to make a new generation of Transformers. The only problem was that they needed to discontinue the originals in order to force people to buy the new ones, and introduce the new toys and make them popular at the same time. The reason that there is even a Transformers cartoon to talk about is down to the fact that Hasbro had commissioned it as a method of direct-to-consumer marketing targeting children. The TV series and the Marvel comic did their job so well that the following year production had to be doubled in the US and Europe to account for the extremely high demand, as the series and toy line created a staple of 80s pop culture, which still sucks up dollars all over the world today. In doubling production, the original toy molds had become depleted and needed to be replaced. Instead of remaking the old molds, Hasbro decided to create a new generation of Transformers and discontinue the originals. They hoped this change would bring in even more money by cashing in on people's desire to have full collections. However, the marketing department became worried that the originals were so popular and people were so attached to them that they wouldn't accept a new toy line. They needed a way to remove the old toys and introduce new ones at the same time. Hasbro decided to go big or go home, and commissioned a $6 million feature-length animated movie in the hope of generating massive sales from both the movie and then subsequently from the toys. Hasbro decided that simply retiring the older generation wouldn't be enough, and wanted customer connection to be completely severed and ready for the new line of toys. And so they gave the writers of the animated movie one specific goal: kill everyone. In modern cinema, well, actually in pretty much all cinema, it's generally considered to be completely insane to kill off your franchise characters, as that pretty much eliminates the possibility of a sequel, since a lot of the time, audiences connect with the characters and killing them also kills that connection. Hasbro didn't give a shit about sequels. They gave a shit about toys. The decision to commit movie suicide led to an amazing writing opportunity. Almost complete freedom. Staff writer for the TV series, Flint Dille, was given the chance to do something that nobody had done with the kids franchise before or since. Make it dark as fuck.
No! Such heroic nonsense.
Dille constructed a narrative which featured a transforming monster planet which literally eats other planets as the movie's antagonist. He mutated Megatron from a laughable buffoon into a bloodthirsty psychopath and created exciting action scenes with actual consequences. And he tied all of that up in a character arc about redemption and personal responsibility. If that sounds like a remarkably adult narrative for a kids' TV series about robots that turn into cars, that's because it is. Within minutes of the movie starting, heroic characters who formerly had never even been damaged by gunfire during the TV series were dying in very graphic fashion. Seeing such well-loved characters die so early in the film created the atmosphere that nobody was safe in this movie. This type of uncertainty generated by the death of popular or well-known characters is something I've only seen used in adult films only a few times, and has never been used in a children's film before or since. It's a technique which is replicated by another writer. A Song of Ice and Fire is the only other example of a writer creating a tense and unpredictable atmosphere by killing off his popular characters. I'm not saying that George R.R. Martin is a Transformers fan or that he's even seen the film, but this pokey cartoon was using the same tension-creating writing mechanics as Game of Thrones, 5 years before George R.R. Martin was. Whether you like the Transformers movie or not, nobody can deny that its writing is dark, and I didn't even get to the crazy part yet. Amongst the many deaths of the film was the death of a character who was not just beloved by fans and children alike, he was revered as one of the best children's role models of that decade. His mandate from Hasbro meant that Flint Dille was forced into the unenviable position of killing the most popular character in Transformers history. 26 minutes into the movie, the franchise flagship character, Optimus Prime, in a move born of complete desperation, flung himself into a heroic battle against the Decepticons in what was the emotional high point of the movie. During the brutal fight with Megatron, Prime was mortally wounded and later died in a surprisingly dark death scene. To give it some context, this would be like James Bond getting stabbed to death 20 minutes into his latest movie, or like blowing Mickey Mouse away with a shotgun 20 minutes into Fantasia. You'd be pretty fucking shocked. Kids of 1986 weren't just shocked, they were completely heartbroken. Countless stories tell of children screaming and crying in the middle of the cinema when Optimus Prime's lifeless corpse lost all of its colour as sinister music played. It wasn't just the death of popular characters which were shocking and upsetting for kids, it was the graphic nature of their deaths that really struck a chord. Any decent writer knows that a hero has to suffer tragedy and feel partially responsible for it in order to completely adopt the role of hero. Dille knew this, and so when Hasbro told him that Hot Rod would replace Optimus Prime as the leader of the Autobots, he decided that Hot Rod's cross to bear would be the death of Optimus Prime. Ordinarily, this would have been a very smart decision, as it gives great weight and motivation to Hot Rod, and since it was his recklessness that partially led to Prime's death, he would learn that impulsiveness often comes with a price, teaching him responsibility in the process. However, the children of 1986 just weren't ready for this, and blamed Hot Rod for the death of Prime, resulting in lower sales of his toy.
Yeah, kids were crying in the theaters, we were hearing about people leaving the movie, we're getting a lot of nasty notes about it. Indeed, we had some kid that locked himself in his bedroom for 2 weeks.
Every month in the Marvel published comic, the letters page was flooded with angry letters from kids and their parents at the death of Prime, something which absolutely nobody had anticipated.
But the real answer is that we didn't know that he was an icon.
The decision to kill off so many well-loved characters gave the narrative a strong sense of gravitas. This in turn is probably what attracted such a strong cast of voice actors, as many of them felt they were making much more than just a toy commercial. According to film director Nelson Shin, the driving factor behind Orson Welles' participation was the weight and dark nature of the story, which he felt was unusually powerful for a kids' movie. At that time in the 80s, even Disney movies rarely attracted casts of high-quality feature-length actors, yet Transformers boasted a cast which included Star Trek's Leonard Nimoy, Orson Welles, Judd Nelson, and popular Monty Python performer Eric Idle. Not before or since had a children's movie based on a toy ever carried such weight with its narrative. To this day, many fans will agree that the writing of a cartoon from 1986 designed solely to sell toys to kids trounces the writing in the live-action version of the same franchise 30 years later. While 9 times out of 10, the greed of a franchise owner often leads to damaging the very IP they're trying to sell, I think it's fair to say that Hasbro's greed actually led to the door being pretty open for the writers to tell a story with some weight. And while this is something we see pretty regularly today, back in 1986, it wasn't quite so common. Hasbro's greed ultimately didn't work out the way they expected, and the second generation of toys didn't sell in the spectacular numbers that the originals did. What it did do, though, was create an entertaining piece of 80s nostalgia, which is still celebrated and revered by fans everywhere over 30 years after its release. And everything from the dark narrative and surprisingly emotional story to its excellent cast of established voice actors and lasting impacts on the 80s youth culture was all because for once, Greed was good.